Ah, the New York City Subway. Such a marvelous and quirky system filled with lots of history. So much history, in fact, that some of it hasn't even been demolished. Welcome to part 2 of New York City Subway Remnants and Provisions, where we will take a look at all the remnants of old infrastructure and provisions for future infrastructure on the New York City Subway in the Bronx and Queens. Before we begin, a shout-out is in order. I would like to give a huge thank you to Welcome to an Experience for allowing me to use their footage in this video. For our look at old infrastructure, we'll start in the Bronx. Between 167th Street and 161st Street Yankee Stadium on the IRT Jerome Avenue line, the two local tracks move away from the Center Express track and two trackways rise up. This is where the IRT 9th Avenue line, otherwise known as the 9th Avenue L, merged with the Jerome Avenue line before this section of the line closed in 1958. The trackways curve to the west before abruptly ending at Yankee Stadium. On the other side of Yankee Stadium is the partially abandoned and partially demolished Anderson-Jerome Avenues station, also on the IRT 9th Avenue line. Most of the station remains in place, although it is heavily graffitied and not in good shape. The station is located here, at the intersection of Jerome Avenue and McCombs Dam Bridge, right next to Yankee Stadium. The station consists of one island platform with two trackways. The trackways continue east into a sealed-off tunnel for a couple hundred yards until they pop out of the tunnel under the Major Deacon Expressway. The tracks would have then continued on an elevated structure over the Putnam Bridge into Manhattan. The Sedgwick Avenue station was located right about here at the tunnel portal, although it has now been walled off. Right after the express track begins to the east of Jackson Avenue on the IRT White Plains Road line, the trackways widen even further to allow space for two tracks to join the line. This is where a connection from the IRT 3rd Avenue line, or 3rd Avenue L, merged with the White Plains Road line until this section of the line closed in 1973. The connection was not typically used in revenue service, however. Staying on the White Plains Road line, just north of West Farm Square, East Tremont Avenue, a trackway stub extends straight out of the station as opposed to the actual tracks that curve to the west. This is where a spur to the now demolished 180th Street Bronx Park station split from the White Plains Road line. 180th Street, Bronx Park, was actually the original terminus of the line before it was extended further north. The station continued to be served by trains until 1952. Adjacent to that trackway stub is another trackway stub, which is the last surviving remnant of the now demolished West Farms Yard. The yard served former Manhattan elevated railway cars, as well as cars assigned to the 2 and 5 trains before it was demolished in 1950. Further up the White Plains Road line, we come to a mass of tracks surrounding East 180th Street Station. Directly next to the White Plains Road line platforms is a second set of 2 island platforms with 4 trackways, with the 2 outer ones still containing track. These platforms belong to the New York, Westchester, and Boston Railway, NYW&B, which ran from the Harlem River to the 3rd Avenue L to White Plains and Port Chester. The line opened in 1912, and once the White Plains Road line arrived at East 180th Street in 1917, the NYW&B opened their own transfer station there. The NYW&B went bankrupt and ceased operations in 1937. In 1940, the subway bought the line up to the border with Westchester County and modified it for subway service. Service was initially only a shuttle, as what was now known as the Dyre Avenue line lacked a connection to the White Plains Road line. The connection between the lines opened in 1957, and the NYW&B platforms at East 180th Street Station were abandoned. The head house, however, is still used as the entrance to the subway station. The Dyre Avenue line was originally quad-tracked. While much of the Center Express tracks have been ripped out, the trackways where they once were still remain. At the end of the Dyre Avenue line at Eastchester-Dyre Avenue, the current island platform is actually built on the trackway of the former express track, with the current tracks occupying the northbound local and southbound express tracks. The southbound local trackway still exists but is not used by trains. Just north of the station, the remnants of the original side platforms from the NYW&B days can be seen through the trees. The right-of-way continues for a bit north of the station. Moving back to the White Plains Road line, to the north of Gun Hill Road Station, 2 trackways rise up between the local tracks and the express track. This is where the IRT 3rd Avenue line merged into the White Plains Road line. What is currently the mezzanine level of the station is where the single island platform for the 3rd Avenue L was located. At Norwood-205th Street Station on the IND Concourse Line, the tracks continue past the end of the station platform. This is a provision for an extension of the line under Burke Avenue and into the northeast of the Bronx. The extension was canceled when the subway bought the NYW&B. At Woodlawn on the IRT Jerome Avenue line, Wakefield 241st Street on the IRT White Plains Road line, and Van Cortlandt Park 242nd Street on the Broadway-Seventh Avenue line, there are two disused side platforms at each station. These platforms are here because the IRT wanted to provide Spanish solution boarding at their Bronx terminal stations, with disembarking passengers using the side platforms and embarking passengers using the island platform. Below 167th Street on the IND Concourse Line is the 167th Street Tunnel. The tunnel used to carry streetcars until 1948 and then buses until 1990, with dedicated platforms located in the tunnel. Today, the tunnel is used by road traffic only. Let's take a brief pause so I can tell you about my Patreon. If you want to support the channel extra, you can join for extra perks, including early access to videos, extra footage that doesn't make it into regularly published videos, and more. Patreon is also where I post all the diagrams I make, which are available for free to everyone. Now for the remnants and provisions in Queens. In the area surrounding Queensboro Plaza on the IRT Flushing and BMT Astoria lines, there are lots of old trackways. The former track layout is way too complicated to go into right now, but I will discuss the trackways that haven't been demolished. The old track layout is a great featured video topic, so stay tuned for that. Starting in the west, we have the trackways over the Queensboro Bridge that came off the IRT 2nd Avenue line, or 2nd Avenue L. The trackways are visible at either end of the bridge, but over the bridge they have been covered by roads. At the east end of the station, trackways run under the current tracks, which is where Brooklyn Manhattan Transit, BMT, shuttle trains to the Flushing Line would have run, and is also where BMT trains coming from the Broadway line and terminating at Queensboro Plaza would have run in order to turn around and return to Manhattan. The trackways then rise up to the level of the current Flushing Line and run on the same structure as it for a few hundred yards. On the Astoria Line side of the east end of the station, there are also trackways that rise up to the upper level and merge with the line, which is where trains from the lower level of the station would access the line. Before the station was cut in half in 1949, the IRT used the southern platforms and the BMT used the northern platforms. Trains running from the Steinway Tunnel onto the Flushing Line used the southernmost tracks, and trains running from the 2nd Avenue L over the Queensboro Bridge onto the Astoria Line used the northern tracks on the southern platforms. On the BMT side, the northern tracks were used for terminating shuttle trains, with Astoria trains on the lower level and Flushing trains on the upper level. The southern tracks were used by terminating Broadway trains coming from the 60th Street Tunnel. Queens-bound trains used the upper level, and Manhattan-bound trains used the lower level, just like they do today. To the east of 21st Street Queensbridge on the IND 63rd Street Line, the tunnels continue straight, while the tracks dive down into the left to connect with the Queens Boulevard Line, QBL. These bellmouths were built as provisions for an extension of the line over the LIRR's main line to provide a Super Express bypass of the QBL. When the station was connected to the QBL in 2001, the bellmouths were extended even further to the east. Further down the QBL is Jackson Heights-Roosevelt Avenue. This station has an incomplete upper level with a single island platform and two trackways. This platform was intended to be a terminal for the unbuilt Winfield Spur, which was part of the unbuilt IND second system. The two trackways continue in a tunnel to the east before curving to the south, and from there the Winfield Spur would have continued south to the Myrtle Avenue line before continuing over the LIRR's Rockaway Beach branch to the Rockaways. There are also two bellmouths, one for each local track, where through trains to Manhattan could have run. Moving down the line, at Woodhaven Boulevard, there are bellmouths on both local tracks on both ends of the station. These are provisions for the station to be converted into an express station in the event that other future expansion plans went forward. One more set of bellmouths on this stretch of the line can be found to the east of 63rd Drive-Rego Park. These bellmouths are for a flying junction where trains would have ran onto the abandoned Rockaway Beach branch. If Queensleak is built, the bellmouths will presumably be used in the modern extension of the M train over the Rockaway Beach branch. At the end of Jamaica-179th Street, at the end of the QBL, there is a large relay yard with two levels that F and Select E trains use to turn around. However, the upper level tracks were meant to be extended further east to Bellerose near the border with Nassau County and are therefore longer than the lower level tracks. Both levels of Jamaica Center-Parsons Archer on the Archer Avenue lines have provisions at the east end. On the lower, BMT level, the tracks continue straight. This is a provision for an extension to the Hollis LIRR station. On the lower IND level, the tracks turn to the south and run to Tuskegee Airmen Way. At the end of the tracks is a provision for a tunnel portal. The line was planned to run over the LIRR's Locust Manor branch to either Springfield Boulevard or the Rosedale LIRR station. Directly west of 80th Street on the IND Fulton Street Line, right as the tracks curve to run underground, there's a small section of trackway from when the line was part of the BMT Fulton Street Line. which ran elevated following roughly the same route as the IND line. To the east of Rockaway Boulevard on the same line, the tracks split into two branches. The branch that heads to the Rockaways uses an old LIRR viaduct, the same Rockaway Beach branch from earlier, which continues north past where the modern subway tracks join the alignment. If QueensLink gets built, the rest of the viaduct will be reactivated for M-train service to the Rockaways. There you have it, all the remnants and provisions on the New York City subway in the Bronx and Queens. If you've made it all the way to the end, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.